Great turnout. My name is Sandeep Varma. I'm the current president of TiE, and I want to welcome all of you. I want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about TiE. TiE is basically fostering entrepreneurship, and I am very proud to tell you the caliber of people that we have at TiE are amazing. Today we have a phenomenal speakers. I had a chance to get an idea of what everybody's talking about. I am very impressed and dying to get started. Couple of things. We have, just a show of hands, how many of you are here for the very first time? Oh wow, great turnout, thank you. Mindy, where are you? Or, there you are. Everybody who's brand new, this is Mindy. Somewhere between today, would you make sure she gets a card from you or talks to you? I would personally like to sit down with each one of you who are new. I want to know a little bit about how you found us and how you can help us and how we can help you. So, Mindy, thank you. I also would like to, could I have all the TiE charter members stand up for a second who are with us? Wonderful, wonderful, thank you, thank you. We have an amazing group of charter members that are the core of TiE. Also, some of the volunteers for TiE, if I could have you stand up as well. The volunteers, and in any organization is only as good as the group, and we have some amazing volunteers who have helped.
They're outside eating.
They're all outside.
They're just getting to the eating.
I want to start off our program. Before we get to the main event, I want to bring up one of the committee member, Barry Sandrew, who is heading up next month's event. And I wanted him to talk a little bit about what's coming up. And as he's talking, I also would like you to, on your comment card that is in front of you, we'll be collecting that at the end, and we'll be doing a raffle, $100 gift certificate. We'll be collecting that at the end. But as he's talking, as we're gearing up for our next month's event, I don't want to take it away from Barry. I would like you to think to yourself how you could possibly help us in putting this next one event on. And if you would like to be part of it, if you know somebody who's a potential sponsor for us, that would be very helpful. I also would like you to take a moment to please turn off your cell phone or vibrate if you haven't already done so. So with that short introduction, Barry, will you come on up here and get us started on our next month and give us a little glimpse of what's coming up? Ladies and gentlemen, Barry Sandrew, please.
As Sandeep said, don't pay any attention to me, just to let me know. That's all. I only have about 30 seconds to talk, so we're going to be fast. But how many people have made it in the cryptocurrency market? Well, it's not too late. Actually, the cannabis market is a new cryptocurrency market. And next month, we're going to be getting into cannabis in a big way. And the title is it time to invest in the cannabis industry? Well, Canada is going to go legal this summer, federally legal. United States, nine states are legal. I think 26 states are legal for medical marijuana. It's all happening. John Boehner, who the House, what is he?
Steve Ballmer's
Yeah. He's now an advisor to one of the biggest cannabis companies. So, I mean, it's all getting very respectable. It's all happening. So you got to look at these penny stocks. You really do at this point. And next month rather, you've got 3 entrepreneurs from the cannabis industry. One of them's already had an exit, so we're going to learn a lot from him. Another one is an entrepreneur, it's Todd Kogan from Therapy Tonics, who has infused coffee, infused tea. It's getting there. I mean, you can find cannabis just about everywhere. But a third one has used genomics to actually grow cannabis in yeast. The beauty of that is CBD, all of the medical therapeutics, we can get 100% pure medical cannabis now. Even the most bizarre trace cannabinoids that we haven't even discussed, we haven't even really studied yet, those can be made pure. And I want to introduce the CEO of that company, CB Therapeutics. His name is Cher. Cher?
Hi everyone, my name is Sher. I'm the co-founder and CEO of CB Therapeutics. What we do is we make cannabinoids using just sugar in yeast. And the process is only 5 days. There's no contaminants. And we'll get into exactly the different parts of it. But why do people actually use cannabinoids? So the majority of people use cannabinoids for pain or other issues that they have today. But again, 65% of that is for severe pain. One issue that we're targeting with this is the opioid epidemic. People are taking opiates that kill 40,000 Americans every single year. And the problem is that these compounds, they unintentionally overdose on them. So there are other alternatives that are non-toxic to people. So the problem today is that cannabinoids are made still in cannabis and hemp plants. And again, there's supply chain and quality issues. First and foremost being that there's a lot of pesticides and other contaminants that are found in cannabis. These products are not CGMP manufactured, and sometimes people are filling these capsules and other products in their garages. And finally, because it's a plant material, there's a lot of batch variation from each single plant variety that they have. On the supply chain side, it's even worse. It's 60 to 120 days to make a single crop. There's not many different cannabinoids that you can get from the plant source. So there's only THC, I'm sure everybody here knows THC. There's also CBD, the non-psychoactive cannabinoid. But those are the only two that you can find in the market today. So we thought outside the box and came up with biosynthesis. And the idea is now we don't have to worry about anything with plants. We've just taken genes and infused them into yeast and other microorganisms, which allows us to produce something that's completely pure. There's no pesticide, obviously, because there's no plants, there's no heavy metals. On the supply chain side, it has even more benefits. Like, it only takes 5 days for the whole crop, instead of 60 to 120 days. There's minimal processing because the product is relatively pure. And we're already making 15 different cannabinoids confirmed by the Scripps Research Institute, 13 more than what the plant can actually produce on a larger scale. This is a groundbreaking and disruptive idea, and I invite you to the next month's event to learn more. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. So, I want to bring up our, get our program started. Dervan Dakar has really head up this whole panel, put this whole thing together. And so with that short introduction, Devon, would you come on up here and get the program started? Let's give him a hand, please.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to have you guys all here. Before we get started with the main presentation, there's one more startup we'd like to bring up. Stephanie from Persephone. Persephone. Please come on up and present your startup. And I'd like the audience to also take a moment after she's done to see if you have any questions or if you have any offers of introducing her to either funding sources or any kind of biz dev opportunities. That would be great. Come on up.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. We've been incubating at J Labs since July of last summer. And so I am the co-founder and CEO for Persephone Biome, and we are using the gut microbiome to cure cancer. The challenge, the problem that we're looking to solve is that the human gut microbiome impacts the efficacy of checkpoint inhibitors. These are drugs that can provide potential cure to some patients. Unfortunately, 70 to 80% of cancer patients do not respond to these groundbreaking therapies. And recent studies have shown, in fact, back-to-back science papers published late last year, as well as January of this year, has shown that a patient's response to these drugs is linked to the composition of their gut microbiome. And so our solution to this problem are microbiome combination therapies. We're taking an engineering and systems biology approach to elucidate the gut microbes and the specific metabolism that allows a cancer patient to respond. We use this knowledge to create live biotherapeutics, otherwise known as FDA-approved probiotics, that will essentially restore key metabolic functions needed to ensure the efficacy of cancer immunotherapy. Myself and my co-founder are chemical engineers. We're pioneers in the space of microbial systems and synthetic biology. Our entire team has worked together for the last 7 to 13 years, where previously we commercialized a microbial-based product. In terms of recent traction, we just graduated from Y Combinator and finished our seed round of fundraising. So I'm excited to announce that. And we completed our in vivo proof of concept. We have live biotherapeutics that can improve the efficacy of checkpoint inhibitors in a preclinical mouse line. And we have a collaboration with UCSD's Morris Cancer Center. What I've shown here is patient response to checkpoint inhibitor treatment. On the right-hand side in green are the 20% of cancer patients that respond to these therapies. Their microbiome is noted to be quite high and diverse in nature, so rich in metabolic function. This is very similar to a healthy individual. On the left-hand side in red are the cancer patients that unfortunately do not respond to these groundbreaking drugs. For those 80%, they have very limited diversity in terms of their gut microbiome. Few microbes, few functions. What we're doing is leveraging our proprietary technology platform, which is based on fermentation engineering and systems biology, to understand the particular microbes that's required for a patient's response. Use that knowledge to create microbial therapeutic that can be given to all cancer patients, but really with the focus of converting non-responding cancer patients to becoming responders. Could we go from 20% of people being potentially cured to 40% or 60% or higher? That's our vision, that's our mission. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Stephanie, one quick question. What's your round of funding? What are you looking for?
Well, we just closed, but we're starting the Series A financing in the fall.
In the fall,
Yeah.
okay. And you're courting some VCs right now?
We have, but we're looking to expand that network. Absolutely.
Okay, so any audience members, see there's
Oh.
one, so you can connect with her after.
No, I don't have money, I have a question.
She has a question. You raised your hand when we were talking about VCs.
I just wanted to know, where are you located, and are you still under the aegis of some university, or are you spun off, or do you have, how many people you have working with you? Just get some
Okay, yes, we are upstairs. There's 5 of us, and we've developed this technology from scratch. Yeah, but the entire team has worked together previously, so that's part of it. Yeah.
Why do you need FDA approval?
These, it's a live biotherapeutic. This is going to be taken. It's for therapeutic use, so that's why it needs FDA approval, and it's in combination with an immuno-oncology therapy.
Has the method of fecal transplants been used to demonstrate that the 20% could get closer to the 80%?
It's in clinical trials right now. There's a phase 2 clinical trial sponsored by Merck, where they're actually taking fecal material from cancer patients that have responded to these therapies and are implanting in non-responders.
How could this be different from the fecal transplants that you're doing?
Absolutely. So this is a refined consortia of bacteria, and it's going to be consumed orally.
Last question.
Yes.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank
to
you.
graduating from Y-Combinator. Very, very impressive. Above and beyond anything else you've
Thank
presented
you.
here. I'd like to know what the women representation was at Y-Combinator.
The highest ever. 17%, I believe, had a female founder. Yeah.
Out of the total number?
Of 150 companies.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we're getting to the main presentation. Gender inequality. I think from the audience in the attendance here, I see most of men in my network ignored my call to come to the event. Now this is a serious topic, and I have to really thank Judy, who's on the panel, to pulling this together at a very short notice and bringing the amazing group of speakers that you'll be hearing from. So I'd like to invite Judy up first. She is the Beverly Hillbillies in reverse. She's a Beverly Hills girl who ran away from Beverly Hills. So the Beverly Hillbillies came to Beverly Hills, and she went off into the woods for, I think, a good decade or something, if I remember correctly. But she actually is a COO of, sorry, I'm having a hard time reading small print here. She's a COO of Biofluidica. This is her second venture. And in her first venture, she was the CEO, and her husband was, I believe, CSO. And now they have reversed the roles, apparently. He's the CEO. So that's a great way to find a company and run a venture. Next up, I'd like to invite Liz Bowie. Liz is... she has a phenomenal story, and I don't think she'll be able to get to all of it today. But she is, if you ever get a chance to hear her story, you'll see why a woman like Liz can rise to the level that she has risen. She's actually originally from Vietnam and left on a boat at a very young age with siblings without parents. And it is mind-boggling to me to see somebody having gone through that level of trauma to be able to rise to the level that she has risen. She is currently the Vice President and Intellectual Property Counsel at Biosite. Next up, I would like to invite Cara Bartone. So, Cara, we have to thank her for hosting us here today. This is her home, her baby. She runs this place, believe it or not. And so we're glad to have her on the panel. And she has a pretty interesting, colorful history too. She's a boxer, if you can believe that. And a boxer can wrestle with so many startups. That's unusual. I think the two sports don't mix, but she somehow managed to do that. And I've known her for almost 7-8 years since the place opened. And she has risen in just last 7-8 years to running this place. And that's just phenomenal. So thank you, Cara, for hosting us. Next up is Sabrina Johnson. Thank you. Sabrina is the CEO of Dare Bioscience. And I did not realize her company is a public company listed on NASDAQ. And she is the a CEO who took it public by a reverse merger. Now this is a man's world typically. If you go to Wall Street and try to take a company public, hardly any women out there. And so it'll be incredible to hear her story. She's also born in Rome, believe it or not, and was baptized by the Vatican. So that's a little tidbit I was impressed to hear.
She's set for life.
See, even her fellow panelists didn't know that. Last but not least is Holly Smithson. Holly is the CEO of Athena, and we're so happy that she's agreed to moderate this panel. Holly, if she looks familiar,
Now blessed in the Lord.
that should have, I hope somebody captured that shot.
After the event, we need that shot.
That was a Kodak moment. Holly, if she looks familiar, maybe to some of you, anybody here from North Carolina? Nobody? She's actually a journalist and anchor on TV in North Carolina in her earlier life. And she's also a recovering politician, believe it or not. George W. appointed her, I think she was appointed to work in his administration under Condoleezza Rice. So that's a pretty distinguished qualification, and so we're glad to have you here, Holly. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Holly, have a wonderful panel discussion, and we'll see you at the end.
Thank you and welcome everyone. Now I have to be blessed.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Check. 1, 2, 3. Great. Good evening, everyone, and delighted to see so many friendly faces in the audience. As was introduced, we have a very august panel gathered here tonight so that all of you can really learn some of the magnificent stories that they're going to share with us tonight. So obviously the name of the program tonight is Women in STEM, Shattering the Glass Ceiling. And I want to know how many people know what the glass ceiling, the metaphor, means. Who wants to take a stab? How about the gentleman in the front?
A glass ceiling.
And can I have you speak up, please?
A glass ceiling refers to a fill the room. Glass ceiling refers to intangible or real barriers that prevent women from rising above a certain level in an organization.
That's almost verbatim, thank you very much, as defined by the United States Federal Glass Ceiling Commission, which oddly enough which was actually launched in 1991 by George Herbert Walker Bush. And really interesting that when Judy asked to pull the program together, did a little bit of research and discovered that there was a commission in fact in place. And it has been dissolved, but it was launched in 1991. And they defined it obviously as the gentleman did in the second row, but it was also a metaphor in the Asian culture as the bamboo ceiling. And it's really about this barrier, and not only for women, but for minorities that were trying to ascend beyond a certain level in the hierarchy. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, and really excited about the opportunity for these women. Obviously, you've heard the backgrounds. I'm in awe to share in the company of them. Obviously, Dari Biosciences and Biofluidica, those women serve on Athena's board of directors. Athena, just by background, has been around 20 years. We're celebrating 20 years this year. And this has been a really incredible platform for women and women advocates in Southern California to come together and help support and mentor and elevate those women that want to work within the STEM fields. So delighted to share in their company and to tell you about their climb to the top. So with that, what I'd like to do is spend a couple of minutes doing a brief intro about your careers, and I'm going to start with you because you're blessed. And really talk and talk a little bit about your success, and some of the things that you thought were critical to getting to the top.
Sure. So I'll very quickly give my background and overview, and I've taken a very circuitous route, so it's not a very typical path, but I am a biomedical and biochemical engineer by training. And pretty quickly realized, landed a great job in research, and very quickly realized that while I love science, I hated the laboratory. So I transitioned, went back to school, got my MBA, and moved to San Diego, wanted to be in one of the biotech hubs, and I got some great advice to start in sales. So I did, sales, marketing, and eventually through a very strange set of circumstances, I was with a publicly traded company, and our CFO left in the middle of the financing, and our CEO offered me that opportunity, which was really an important turning point in my career. Most people would probably not jump from Vice President of Sales and Marketing to Chief Financial Officer of a publicly traded company. but someone opened the door and I walked through it, and it really turned my career around. So I spent 13 years at that company. Went and worked in global health for a while, and women's reproductive health, wanted to save the world. And did that for a few years, and that experience was really the inspiration for founding TiE. So I started the company in 2015, focused on bringing products to market that advance women's reproductive health in a variety of forms and diseases or circumstances she may encounter throughout her life and her reproductive ages. And decided to take the company public in 2017. Realized that it was challenging to raise money in an environment for women's reproductive health because there just isn't a lot of focus on that and there's not a lot of deal flow. And thought that being public would actually give us greater access to capital. So found a vehicle to do that in a reverse merger after a very deliberate process of searching for that. And fast forward, we are publicly traded on the NASDAQ. We have several products now in development for a variety of different women's health indications. So that's my very short, try to be short version.
Thank you.
Tough act to follow. Hi everyone, Cara Bortone. I'm head of JLabs here in San Diego. So I'm also a scientist by training, structural biology, and after that I moved to Europe for about 10 years, where I worked also in investor relations at a publicly traded company. And we happen to have, the company's name was Galapagos, and we happen to have J&J as one of our partners. So when I decided to move back to the States, it was a natural connection. I'd come back here and happened to know Diego Morales, the site had been, and got introduced to JLabs, then called Janssen Labs. And yeah, that was 6 years ago. So it's been amazing. And you asked earlier about the Y Combinator statistics. And something I'm really proud of at JLabs is that we have about 20, actually when we did the survey a year ago, we had 20% women-led companies. I think now we're probably even closer to the 25%, hedging up towards that number. We've had a number of women join as CEOs lately, so I'm really excited to just work with all these amazing women.
Liz.
My name's Liz Bui, and as Devon sort of gave you my short history, I don't need to repeat a lot of that. But I think I find myself in doing what I do because most of the time I just say yes. And it just sounds kind of funny, but for those of you who are, and I know many of you out there, many of the women here I see are totally successful, probably more successful than some of us here on stage in your own right. But this is appealing to the sort of the younger, those of us who are out there, and that is really when someone asks you to do something, just say yes. I don't know how you're going to do it. You don't even know how you're going to do it. But you'll find a way. And I feel like, for myself, that's sort of how I found my success. Someone asked me to do something, I said yes. Can you be a science writer? Yes, I can. Always not on my own science? Well, I can figure that out. Can you be a lawyer? And we'll pay you. Yes, I can. So there's almost just a series of steps of, can you do something? And it's, yes, I can. And so, and it all works out. You'll figure it out, and I'm here.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Liz. Judy?
All right, so I got my degree, my PhD in microbial biochemistry in France at the Pasteur Institute, and I arrived there pregnant with the first of 4 of my children. I had to learn a new language, I became a mother, I had to learn molecular biology, and not every day for a year. But I got through it. I finally yelled at the refrigerator fix-it man in French after the first year, and that was real success. So, I've had a lot interesting bumps in my career. I did hit a glass ceiling. I was told once that my manager told me that he had trouble working with me because I was a woman. And it was very shocking, so I, of course, went to HR, and I got a new job within the company. But I had a lot of success in that company. The company was a public company. It was then sold, so I made some money, which was great, and realized that I wanted to move out of research science. I wanted to stay in San Diego, and the company was moving to the Midwest. And so I decided to follow the footsteps of my family, which had come from a bunch of entrepreneurs, not scientists, but entrepreneurs. And I wanted to go into business. So I got a job in business development at a startup, and it was fun. It was networking, it was deal making, it was even contract reading was fun. And out of that, my career started to take a different turn. It was really business. but I was still a scientist at heart. And so my husband, you heard I'm in business with my husband. This is our second company together. It's right here. And we had the business of raising children together, but also starting companies. So we invented a technology that was commercialized. We commercialized it, sold it all around the world. And it was for stabilizing, it continues today, to stabilize biological samples at room temperature. And I was the CEO, the founding CEO of Biomatrica. Unfortunately, in my time there, over a decade, at the end of it, I developed breast cancer. And that was a big surprise. You know, you always think you're invincible, but you're not. And so that changed our lives. And I then became a student of precision medicine. I learned what my disease was. I figured out my treatment. I figured out my diagnostics, and it really did change our life. We hired someone else to run the company and left and started a new company, or joined a new company in cancer diagnostics. So now I am the COO of Biofluidica. I'm very happy being a COO and not being a CEO, actually. And I have a great partner. I'm very lucky. I have a partner that I trust. It's been an interesting journey so far. So thank you all for attending. I really do appreciate you being here.
So I'm scanning the room here tonight, and I'd like to see with a show of hands how many people as a woman or a minority have felt this glass ceiling that we're here to talk about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to say this is probably about 40% of the room, which would make sense as to why you're here. And so let me tell you the numbers. Let me share with you the club that you are a part of. Here are some national statistics. 15% of women hold positions in the C-suite. 17% of all startups have women founders today. And only 2% of the total VC funding actually goes to women founders and startups. So these are some pretty stunning figures by any measure. So I think what you're going to hear tonight is a diverse collection of experiences with the glass ceiling on our panel tonight. So let me start with you, Liz. And it's really interesting to hear your story about coming over from Vietnam and then to be sitting on this panel and sharing your story. So tell us a little bit about the glass ceiling and whether or not you experienced it, and if you did, what was your instinct to combat it or mitigate it?
It's like perfection. It's sort of a moving target, so the closer you get, the further it moves. And so I think the glass ceiling is very much like that as well. Because I change as a person, I develop, and you know the needs of what I was when I was 20 years old, 30 years old, or 40 years old have evolved over the years as well. And so what I perceived as the glass ceiling at 20, 30, and 40 are different than what I perceive now. And I think for me, the glass ceiling also has to come with being my truest self. Does that make sense? In other words, it has to be my version of what the VP and IP council role is. It just can't be. I'm not really ever happy when someone says that this is like, you know, and let's just say for the sake of argument here, a male version of what this role is like. It has to be what my feeling of it is like and what I can do with it. And much of it is, you know, it's working with the best people, working with really just good people, people I like as people, you know, and not just as business leaders. I actually have 2 biosite ladies here, our head of HR, Cheryl, and also political scientist, Angela. So thank you both for coming. And I think, you know, a place that fosters women, and not just, but, you know, and helps them develop into their best selves, whatever that may be. And have I really, and I feel like, I mean, interestingly enough, I feel like where I really ran up against that was when I worked for women. You know, that's not what people want to hear, but that's really quite true. In both the instances where I left because I was truly unhappy was when both my supervisors and the people I reported to were both women. And so that's kind of, you know, and I don't want to be that to those I advocate for and mentor. And so I think that's sort of an interesting irony to that story. But I think some of you, based on the heads I saw, have had that similar sort of experience. And so I encourage all of us to sort of, as Sarah, who I had dinner with just a few minutes ago, said, to basically be, putting the ladder down for others. Once we, get to where we think we are, again, you're constantly changing, you're constantly wanting more. But, just to always put the ladder down so that you can help other people, men and women, rise.
So you're saying that men don't have the corner on keeping women down?
That's absolutely right. I think you need, I can see that maybe it's because I'm legal, and I can see that objectively. And so, but I've had plenty of women, such as Judy, who are, great colleagues, great friends, who have also supported me. But I would just say, as far as my career, that's my history.
And Sabrina, I see you nodding your head. So why don't you share with the group, if you will, those mentors or those people that were in your career path that actually enabled the success that you've enjoyed?
Yeah, and I love to frame it, and I use this phrase a lot about people opening doors, and I totally agree with the say yes, because a lot of times I think the challenge is that people open doors and we don't walk through them. We choose not to. And so I've been very fortunate. I'll say, first of all, I'm a little bit controversial in this, but I don't see it as a glass ceiling, and maybe that's why I've never encountered it, because I never noticed that it was there. But I've also been very fortunate, and I like to recognize that I have had people in my career who have opened those doors. And so I was very fortunate early on in my career that I had a CEO who recognized potential. It wasn't worried about whether someone had been in a role before. It was very common for him to kind of put people in positions that they had never done before, because he was very astute. He was a MD, PhD, psychiatrist by training. I think he loved to use that in the workplace and psychoanalyze us. But then he would, create opportunities. And he was the person that came to me when I was vice president of sales and marketing. I was running a commercial organization, and we had made a decision to divest it. And he said, we need a CFO. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, I can help you. Yeah, we should look for that. And he said, no, I mean, you should be our CFO. And I'm like, okay, I took like one accounting class, not in my MBA. I was marketing MBA. But he just really believed I could do it, and I felt such a loyalty to him that I said, you know what, I don't want to let the company down. I know we're in the middle of trying to do a financing. Sure. Whatever this CFO thing is, I'll do this CFO thing. And it turned out the CFO thing was sales and marketing. I mean, in a publicly traded company, a lot of what you're doing is selling the company to investors in a good way. I don't mean a bad way. And so it was a fit, and I was in that role for 9 years, and spent 13 years at that company, and eventually transitioned to COO, and we eventually sold that company. So I was very fortunate to have a mentor and someone, and he was male, and he was a guy, but someone who could look beyond what we do. But I think we don't always have that, but even if you don't have that, for us as individuals to try to see what a role really takes as opposed to what we've perfectly done in our background, to be able to step into that. And probably if I'd gone through that exercise for myself, I probably would have walked into his office and said, I should be the CFO, because a CFO is sales, and there's no one else here better to sell the company than me who's been doing it this time. So I would also challenge us to try to be our own advocates for ourselves, and sometimes look beyond our own resumes to what an actual position requires, and help others make that leap if you aren't fortunate enough to have that person who just beautifully opens the door for you.
And this might segue next into Judy. So you had mentioned in your remarks about being held back by someone who didn't share the same worldview as perhaps the men in Sabrina and Liz's career. So can you elaborate a little bit on that, how it made you feel, whether or not you started to question your own capabilities? Am I in the right place? Is this the world I'm stuck in? Or how did all that sit with you, and what approach did you use?
I didn't doubt my capabilities. I went to HR. I said, this is the problem, and find me a new job in this company. Maybe in this day and age it would have been a lawsuit. It was a long time ago. It could have been a lawsuit back then, but I was building my scientific career in San Diego, and I actually liked what I was doing, so I just took a traditional route. I went to HR. And it was disappointing because I was going in one direction in my scientific career and I had to switch and go in a different direction. But it turned out okay for me. It was a little scary because even HR can often be more attuned to the executives of a company than to the scientists at the bench. But in the end, they did me right, and I found a new job within the company. So it's okay. I mean, I've actually run up against that barrier throughout my life. Someone asked me tonight, have you actually ever hit the glass ceiling? And I hit it when I was born. I have only brothers. My father remarried, and he married a woman with 4 boys, and we had 3 boys and me. And so I continually hit that ceiling from childhood. I was lucky. I had a grandmother who was very, very forward-thinking. She used birth control in the 20s, and she knew where she was going. She was a very successful woman, an immigrant, and went from rags to riches with her husband. She worked with her husband like I do, so it was a very good example for me. But I hit that roadblock a lot in my life, but I just tell people to take a hike, but not so polite.
Kara, give us your perspective. I'm interested in hearing your story as well. You talked earlier in the evening talking about being overseas, and can you shed a little bit of light on what that was like for you?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I did start my career, I'm American, but I started my career in Europe. So I spent 10 years in Europe before I even had worked in the US. So I do have a little bit different perspective. Having worked for a large, now large, publicly traded company in Europe. And I think it was interesting what you said about women. I hadn't really thought about it like that before, but in fact, I do think that you a lot of times work with women, and I'm not sure if it's because, it might be 2 reasons. One might be because they're maybe a bit jealous or envious of what you're doing, and another might be maybe they're pushing you. I think it can kind of come from 2 directions. But definitely seeing that can be an issue, and that's definitely what I experienced working in this European company. And the other thing was that the entire board, leadership team was all men. And I remember being really discouraged at that point, and someone I had met in the US said, I only apply for a role at a company if they have at least 1 woman on either the board or the leadership team, because I think that just really tells a lot about the culture. And ever since then, I've really taken that to heart, and really when I've been looking at positions, I always try to look for roles where there are women in leadership positions. We were talking earlier that even though at that point, this is 10 years ago in Europe, but they were maybe a little bit more behind as far as their attitudes towards women, a little bit more boys club attitudes, but they have in fact changed a lot in Europe. So they have a lot of regulations, especially in the Scandinavian, Nordic companies, that boards should be a certain percentage women. You can argue whether or not that's a good or a bad thing. Maybe you don't always get the right qualified women if you necessarily say it has to be 20% or 25%. But certainly it is breaking open opportunities for women. And one thing I'm really glad to see is, sometimes there is, and I think we'll maybe talk about it a bit later, but the fact that there is unequal pay for men and women. And I know we just celebrated Equal Pay Day, which is April 10th. Which is how long a woman has to work to make the same amount that the man had to make on December 31st last year, which is just, to me, shocking in this day and age. We're still having that conversation. But California did, in fact, recently pass a law that said that companies cannot ask what a woman currently makes, or what anyone currently makes, in fact. So I think that really puts us on an equal playing field, because too often women put themselves in the position of maybe kowtowing to, oh, this is what I made, this is what I'm worth, rather than necessarily really being seen for their true value. And so that's, I think, a really great step.
Can I comment though with regards to that California law? So here's the thing about some laws, is that they can be objectively written, but still have bias in their practice. And I think that law, California law, is one of them. So you can say that it's illegal to ask for what you make, but that doesn't prevent you from lowballing just because you need sex. It just prevents you from asking what you make, right? And so that doesn't really stop, that's not a solution to the problem. It's just objectively written such that you can't really discriminate with regards to what gender you do it in on the surface. But it doesn't necessarily prevent the actual still gender bias.
I think it, though, doesn't carry through from your previous life what they see as your intrinsic value. You could always argue that maybe in general people across the board lowball women. That might be another argument. But at least you're not being docked for your previous career and what they saw your value as being.
Right.
So I think that gives you a kind of fresh start.
It does give you a fresh start, but I don't necessarily think it eliminates the bias.
Sure.
So we heard some numbers. We heard you talk about the Y Combinator graduating class. Women were represented at 18%. Another percentage I think I heard was 23%. I'm forgetting what that metric was. JLabs.
We're closer to around 25%. Yeah.
25% of the companies in their incubator are represented with women as founders. There's some research that Athena has partnered with UC San Diego around talking about the compensation, the pay and parity, or parity in pay, for women in STEM. And I think over the last 26 years, we've shown that the data has shown that there's been fluctuation, but that by and large, it's been anywhere between 25 and 28% of that gap. So we really haven't moved the needle a whole lot in the last quarter of a century. So while those of us may or may not have let the glass ceiling hold us back, the numbers say that the lion's share of women, specifically in STEM, have. And so I guess I would like to really challenge this audience and really challenge all of us tonight to think about what sort of call to action for those of us that have been very, very blessed and have been very, very fortunate to be where we are and to have not too many rungs left on that ladder, other than just to conquer the world and conquer disease. But really think about the responsibility that we have as people that have been successful and that have overcome some of these obstacles, not only culturally, the obstacles morally, and then I think legally. Because as we know, a lot of the companies, when you sign on to join a company, there's an NDA that says you will not file any suit against a company if anything goes awry. So let me just open it back up to the panel and ask what you think. As women who are tremendous examples for what happens when you shatter the glass ceiling, what can you do, or what can we do as an organization and as a community to help our sisters ascend to the top?
I would
Nice, are we doing?
Yeah, so, yeah, hire them. So, at our last company, we were always 50-50, and it was based on merit. Our current company, we're a small company, we're 20 people, but we are 75% women. And I probably shouldn't say this here because some of our staff are here, but when I have a woman who interviews and I know we're going to hire her, and if she does not negotiate for her salary, I make her do it. Because it's a small interaction, it's a small gain for women at large, it's a huge gain for how we work together. And so it's something that I actually make people do when the men usually have no problem, and I hate to be so sexist about it, but I have had women, probably not the women in this audience who work for us right now, but some who've joined who just really didn't stand up for themselves. You know, we offer good salaries, but you know, you can always do a little bit better, and you should. And I also like to see someone who's willing to fight for themselves, even in an interview situation. Not too much, though.
Sabrina?
Well, yeah, I'll add, so I'm in a really fun situation right now. I'm having founded a company and being CEO and getting to really create that corporate culture and thinking about ways that I can have an impact. And our company is focused on women's reproductive health, so we're very women-focused, you know, in terms of our therapeutic area. So it was really important to us to create an environment that was very supportive of women in the workplace. And really diversity in the workplace, because honestly I think the best innovation comes when you get people of diverse thought and process and how they approach a situation. So we really try to encourage that, and we really try to look at what people need at different points in their lives. So we have people where what's really important to them is to be able to go surfing in the morning. They don't have kids, but they really want to surf before work or leave when it's a good break. And so we try to create an environment that allows them to do that and still work, you know, when we need things done, or create And the people that have small children want to leave it too, so they can pick up their kids. People who are older and they're caring for older parents. So
We have a
part of
pumping
the
station in our office.
yeah, I mean that's so part of it is really creating that environment where women are often a caregiver in their household where they can do that. But also as important, and we have a lot of women on our staff in leadership and in staff positions. But also I felt we were in a very unique position at being a publicly traded company to really set an example about our board of directors. It's really, really hard for women to get a seat on a public company board. And that's not because they're not experienced, it's because typically to serve on a public company board, someone wants to see that you've had prior public company board experience, which there's no way to get the experience if someone doesn't put you on the board. So we basically made it a policy in our recruiting for our board that that was not a requirement. And instead, we put a very thoughtful matrix together of what skills we were looking to fill on our board, and then recruited based on that. And we have 6 board members, and 4 of them are women. So I think you do have to, we thought hard about how we can have an impact, and I think any of us who are hiring have an obligation to think about how we can create an environment that allows the best person to serve with us in whatever role that may be. And whether they're male, female, what race, what ethnicity, it doesn't matter, just creating that environment.
Yeah, so J&J is pretty diverse, I have to say, at the upper echelon. So we're about a third of the board and also a third of the leadership team are women, which is very nice to see. And then I have to say our group at J-Labs is pretty dominated by women. In fact, my colleague Tom says it's really amazing that a white male brings diversity to the team. He's really proud of that. So we are very close-knit, and I think it does create a different type of culture. Which we really like, and I try to also promote that. I invite everyone over to my house for Christmas and home cooked meal, and try to really have that type of relationship with the team. I think it's really a unique thing about being a woman, ruling with, luring with them with honey, I guess is what you call it, rather than beating them with a stick. So that's the approach I tend to use. But certainly there are some other things that J&J is doing across the board, which I just actually learned about. I'm on the Wisdom 2D pillar, and we just had our award ceremony on Thursday last week, and I learned that J&J actually has a program for women who are looking to come back into the workplace. So many times, women take the role of raising the kids, and they might be gone, out of the workplace for 5, 10, 15 years. How do you re-enter the workplace having been out of it for that long? So I thought that was so encouraging to hear that that's a problem, that society has. It's society's problem, that that's the role that sometimes women take, and that it's a waste of potential, honestly, that women are not able to start again in their careers, and they feel they're limited by that. So I was really encouraged to hear we have a program like that, and I hope a lot of women take advantage. And I know some people just around the table were also just as delighted to hear that. So I think that's a really great move.
So I think everything that Judy, Cara, and Sabrina have said, is very true, and I don't want to repeat myself with regards to that. But I think one thing that I think I've been very successful at is I'm a really open person, and so I think and I'm open with regards to helping people, and I'm open with regards to people in all walks of life and through different areas of my social, my philanthropy work, and in helping advocate and helping connect people. And so I think the giving of my time, which is, your time is the most valuable thing you often have, and I'm pretty generous with that. And I think that's not only just helped, my mentors, my mentees, and people I advocate for, but it helps make me a better person. And so I think it's good for my daughter to see that she just doesn't have to always listen to what I say, but do as I do, and that's important to me. And so along with everything that Sabrina, Judy, and Cara have said, I think that's also something that, and it doesn't take that much time. And actually, you get really good at it. It's good, and it's good for society. It's good for communities.
Yeah, and the thing that I really think is important is for women to have strong visibility of other women who have actually been met with so much success. So I really want to acknowledge TiE San Diego chapter for creating this format so that we could again showcase the women that actually shattered the glass ceiling, and again time after time after time, really showing that it can be done. And I think we're at an incredible tipping point in our society. Not here in California, not here in the US, but nationally. In fact, the United Nations has a joint initiative with UN Women and the Global Compact USA. And these two groups launched what's called the Women's Empowerment Principles Initiative back in 2000. And so they designed this toolkit, if you will, for companies to sign on as signatories around the world and really show them that by empowering women through these tools, that they too can then scale them across the enterprise and start to see the increased productivity and start to see the increased profitability that we're all starting to see here in the US in the research by McKinsey, the research by Citibank, the research by Merrill Lynch that ties when there's more women in the C-suite and there's more women diversity within these companies, they are being rewarded handsomely, not only financially but also in the retention of their talent. So having said all that, now that we have this toolkit, we actually have to get it out to companies. And now that we have the diversity showing that that's an economic imperative for these companies, how do we actually start to change the norms that are still going to take a while to overturn? You can show the numbers, but changing people's norms, changing people's beliefs, their fundamental beliefs, these hidden biases, these not so hidden biases, they're real and they're there and they're deeply embedded in our society. And I know I'm speaking to the choir here because we've all experienced it. So again, I want to keep coming back to the action. Athena, we have a strong action orientation. And so I'd like to ask, and maybe it's a time to open up to the audience and get some feedback from all of you in terms of what you think would be useful to help you guys continue to shatter the glass ceiling. I think what's really important is that we also have women advocates around this conversation, which is a nice segue to the gentleman.
I really appreciated what you said as call to action, and I would like to know what other things that we can do organically within our respective organizations to influence change, and also globally from a public policy perspective.
Great. I'll give one. So I do think, and I was using the example of me moving into the CFO position, I think sometimes women don't apply for opportunities unless they think they're perfectly suited. I'll also say that same CEO earlier in my career at that same company had encouraged me. There was an opening when I was still in sales and marketing, because I started in sales marketing, for a product director, and I didn't think to apply for it because I didn't think I was perfect. And he said, well, why wouldn't you apply? You know the product better than anybody. Go for it. So I do think one very actionable thing we can do is within our own organizations, when we see openings and you know of someone, whether it's in your organization or outside, who you think is qualified, encourage them to apply and maybe even help them understand how to frame what they do have in terms of experiences as to being directly translatable into that role. So I think that's definitely very actionable, and also mentoring. Anyone can be a mentor, anyone can be a mentee. It's anyone that you think you can help, give them that encouragement, give them those skills, and anyone who's open to it, that's such an important opportunity to have an impact on someone and maybe make a difference in what they'll do or not.
And I think also looking to people maybe outside of what you maybe think of might be a mentor for you, right? So a lot of times you try to look for someone that maybe looks like you or seems like you or at the same career path as you, and whereas actually you can really get a lot from someone that sounds like the CEO at your company. That maybe wasn't who you maybe had in mind as being your mentor type. So
And at the time, he made me crazy. I mean, I just saw him recently in New York. He lives in New York now, and I told him that now as a CEO, I pretty much do so much the things that he taught me to do, and things at the time made me crazy. He used to have the saying that was, you should be spending half of your day thinking. And I'm like, oh my gosh, do you not know how much work I have to do? I can't sit there and think at my desk half the day. But that was great advice. What she meant was action isn't results. Take a second to think about it. But cool.
The gentleman, did I see a hand back there?
We're all looking at each other.
First of all, I'd like to thank all of you guys for some really great insights. It's been really pleasurable to listen to your stories. So I've been working closely with an organization in our local high school that's associated with trying to promote girls' participation and retention in our school robotics team. And we're really excited about building that up. And so I wanted to ask you all to kind of reflect back, if you can remember back to high school or maybe college, whichever, where you feel, where you may have lost some of your friends that were maybe started out with some enthusiasm for science and STEM, but then lost it, and what you think that I could be able to help younger girls to build their confidence and give them the strength to be as successful as you guys.
Well, I'll start again, but so it's interesting. So I was my high school valedictorian. I was a top student in physics and chemistry, and I never once even considered going into the sciences in high school, in college, until I was studying theater. So that was my intent. I was going to go to college and go to theater. Sounds stupid, but it was one of my teachers, you know, who said, like, what are you worried about, and why are you thinking about this as a career? And you know, I was in sci-fi. I was kind of story, and he gave me like this video about biomedical engineers creating bionic men, and that's how I made that decision to go into that. So I think sometimes with them, it's not even something holding them back from being part of it. Like, I had utmost confidence, and I was, you know, involved in a lot of stuff. I think sometimes it's just them not even thinking about that as something that they should be involved in, and what the tangible value of it is to them. And I know, like, for me, it was him helping relate that to something that I was interested in. I was a big trucking fan, and you know, so he helped relate like what that meant into something he had taken the time to understand that I liked. So I think sometimes it is trying to figure out for them. Sometimes it is the social network for them, like the social, like, I want to be the cool, pretty girl. I don't want to be the nerdy, you know, robotics girl. But helping them understand that actually, like, you can be the cool, nerdy robotics girl, and that's awesome, and you will go great places by doing that. But I think sometimes it's figuring out what parents are doing.
I have to say exactly the same thing. In fact, I think of my daughter. So my husband and I are both scientists, and my kids do not like science and math. They've somehow learned that science and math is hard, and it's not, they don't want to do it. But my daughter, she's very much a beauty queen, and she decided that she wanted to develop a robot that would paint her fingernails so that she would, and that's the way you have to think, right?
Yeah.
That, you know, she's not thinking science and math, she's just thinking, I need an easy way so I can just put my fingers here, select the color, and then a robot will paint my nails.
Yeah.
So that's what she's working on right now, and I couldn't be prouder, because she's not taking that whole slant of that label, because I think for her that might be uncool, but yeah.
Right, that's great, yeah.
Go on.
Okay. I just want to do a quick commercial just for you for Sally Ride Science. It's been going on for 3 years. UC San Diego won the bid for that, so they're now running that program. And I believe it's for grade school girls, and they get selected and they come in for a 4 to 6 weeks program and get so much exposure and get excitement, probably to scenarios like the one described up here. But I'm telling you, they have got some incredible metrics in just 3 short years. So just if you don't know about it, highly recommend investigating it. And I did see several hands. So, and if I can just have you introduce yourself and your organization, please.
Okay. Kelly Krishna, and I work at GiveList. It's a startup. It's called GiveList. Doesn't quite exist yet, but it's getting there. So I really wanted to say I like what you had mentioned about visibility. I was at a company meeting at Hulu, and the entire stage was male executives except for one female. And I honestly, that was so important to me to see. I didn't realize it was missing until I did see it. And then as someone was talking at another event about how growing up there weren't any women CEOs, and now that there are, it's so helpful to know that that exists. So thank you very much for everything you've done. And secondly, you mentioned, it was very interesting what you were saying about negotiation for pay and things like that. I think some of the pay gap has been attributed to the fact that women don't assess their performance correctly. They kind of downplay what it is that they do. Do you have any thoughts on that as far as like how we can help encourage others maybe get to a better place with that.
There's the My Startup XX story, and if anyone here is involved with that and knows the story better, please jump in. But Rady School at UCSD has an entrepreneurial program. It was a My Startup program, and they found that almost only men were applying to this. It was a little kind of learn to start your own company. And they did a survey, and they found that the reason women were not applying was because they said their idea wasn't finished, wasn't perfect enough. And then they interviewed the guys. Guys, some of these guys made it up the night before it. So they started a program out of that, recognizing that women seem to be perfectionists. I always say to my kids, done is better than perfect, because that's what moves you ahead. So they did start a program called My Startup XX, and it's having some great success. Some of us are mentors for it, and we're seeing a lot of great things come out of it. Athena has gotten involved with it and helped to bring it to another level, which has been really exciting to watch. But there is that, that it's not perfect, that you can always see the rough edge in it that you want to sand down or, make it more better, so to speak. And I think that's something that we all battle. I think back on raising children, I always felt like I didn't do this for my kids, I wasn't good enough at that, I was always at work, and every time I said something to my partner, my husband and business partner, he'd think, he's the greatest dad in the world, we're doing the greatest job ever. And in reality, it's probably somewhere in the middle, but he's right.
Good job.
There's one right here.
Oh, my apologies, yes.
I just want to go back to what you were saying. I do educate, you're organized scientist, and there's no one engineer on you, but
Thank you. I was. You're not really
electrical engineer, so I do these electrical engineering classes in high school and middle school. And the last time I did it, there were 0 girls. 0, okay? And that goes to what you said about the core values. And we have to somehow convince the girls that engineering is as, any. And then what we did is we convinced the principal, and he invited Diane Bell. I don't know if you know who Diane Bell is. Diane Bell is an engineer, and she runs the SMASH lab for CNBC. And she gave a talk and tried to explain to the young ladies that they can be engineers as anyone else. And I don't know, we're all going to go home and, you'll have these successful companies, but that still doesn't help me convince the girls in my high school how they're going to be engineers.
But I think sometimes, it's a great point, and I think sometimes too, it's for them to understand what all the different roles and possibilities can be. So, because sometimes their view of what an engineer is very, right, stereotypical, and so, for instance, one of the things I do a lot of volunteering with Tulane University, because that's where I went undergraduate, and I'm connected with them. But they've put a whole program in place too. These are now university girls have already chosen to be in engineering, but to bring in people like me, others who have went their undergraduate, who have graduated as engineers, to talk to them about what we do for a living, because I think sometimes they have this very myopic sort of view of what it means to be an engineer, and to understand how you can apply that. So I feel like I wish we could do more of that in the high schools, right, for the high school girls, to understand there's so many possibilities, and that frankly, by studying engineering, talk about opening doors, any door is open with an engineering degree, and anyone who will listen to me, I tell them that. Anyone who brings their kid to me to talk to them, about what the possibilities are, so I think we can all try to do more of that, maybe ask women in the community who are past engineers.
But I think it's more than, it's engineering, but it's also the life sciences. I sat with Sony and Sarah for dinner, and both are PhDs, and we both lamented at how going through grad school, when you get your PhD, nobody tells you what to do with it except become an academic scientist, and work, become a tenured, full FTE, tenured professor. And then when you don't realize you don't like it or you're not good at it, then you're like, okay, now what, right? And it's hard then to get hired in an entry level somewhere else with that sort of, all of a sudden that PhD, that acronym becomes sort of like its weight, And so, and I think schools need to do sort of almost like treat educating children and students and make it more of also a trade, like, you know, and not just sort of for, you know, academic purposes, but really, you know, show them what you can do with a PhD or what you can do other than if you didn't like the bench work. You know, you can be a writer, you can be a journalist, a lawyer, God forbid. You know, but other things. And I think I had to learn that. And again, you know, sort of like I was in that same similar thing after I did an NIH postdoc fellow. And after a year, I was done. I published my paper, and I was really done. But then it was like, now what do I do, right? And having grown up in the Midwest, you can't leave a job unless you have a job. And so all my life, I've always had a side hustle. And no matter what job I'm doing, I always have this sort of side hustle that I'm also always working, because in case something doesn't work out, I gotta have something else, right? Because, well, that's, but yeah, I still do that, but that's just my survival instinct, so I think that comes from just having come here the way I came. But I think it's just sort of that thing that, you know, you can't really, no one teaches you that, and so you always have, you have to be open, you have to put yourself out there and ask people what you can do, and ask them for jobs, and, you know, you may not be able to do it, and, you know, women more than, I think even men, tend to have this sort of imposter syndrome, we call it, right? We like to be in a closet and sort of make ourselves perfect before we come out and do it, and I certainly see that in my daughter. You know, she'd like to practice everything in the closet first and then come out and be perfect, but that just, you know, life doesn't happen that way. And so, you know, as the saying goes, fake it until you make it. And that's, you just, you know.
Until you become it.
Right, and so you just gotta get going at it. And I think, you know, and it is hard to do. It is. I mean, I find that it's hard to do, and so, but, you know, I try to emulate it for my daughter or for others that, you know, I mentor, but it is hard to do.
Can I just set the record straight? We had an engineer invited for the panel, but she had a scheduling problem. So otherwise, we would have had an engineer, and probably Kara would not allow any engineers in this building.
I don't have a role. We like engineers.
You know, I wanna just address the gentleman in the back of the room, your question, because it's still lingering in my mind. I feel like we didn't address it fully, and I really appreciate the question. You said, what can we do? You said, what can we do globally, but what can we do locally? And that really stayed with me. You know, one of the things, Athena is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, and on Thursday night we're going to be convening an awards gala event with 700 of our closest friends, and celebrating those women and the women advocates that have done a lot to really promote and advance women working in STEM. And that evening we have a special guest speaker, Emily Chang. She's an anchor for Bloomberg Technology, and she's an author of a book called Rotopia. And in it she talks about the glass ceiling, and she talks about a lot of the wealth creation that women have been denied in technology and life sciences and so forth. And then talks about this tipping point where society is suddenly being held accountable for the first time in our lives. The people that have done the things that they've done are now coming back to bite them in the you-know-where. And it's just stunning, and now people aren't afraid to speak up. I think it's because of the internet. We have social media platforms where suddenly the voiceless have a voice, and it's safe. And so there's all sorts of stories that compound and show up in ways that hold people that, because of their power, have never been held accountable for lacking diversity in the workforce and lacking parity in pay. And so it's an exciting time. And so I really appreciate your question. What can we do? Tell us what we should do. And I want to ask the panel to chime in, but this whole notion of having more women advocates, and really the ones that, you know, maybe have a partner that they go to work, you know, that they work for, or they have daughters, or they have, you know, wonderful experiences, and they want to support and champion women. I mean, I just think that is such an awesome opportunity, and for the men to want to step up and do that, I commend you for wanting the tools. You know, tell me the how, the when, the why. I think that's another dynamic that we've never seen before. So, having said that, I would love to ask and kind of throw back the question to the group about how we might be able to support or foster a women's advocate movement. And I know there is backlash from other men in companies that step up for a woman and sponsor or mentor and say, what are you doing? You're just creating more competition. What are you doing? You know, there's real backlash that has been tracked in that. So I'm wondering what the thoughts are of the panel in terms of building that infrastructure, if you will, for women advocates.
Hire more women. Get to 50-50. It's not that hard. In life sciences, there are plenty of educated, thoughtful, hardworking women, and it's not discriminatory. I think sometimes people think it is discrimination. It is not. The people who have knocked on the doors of the two companies where I've had a say, it's been really a fair bake-off based on their qualities and their experience. It's really not that hard. The 20%, I don't even understand that. I really don't. We are a population of 50-50, maybe not always in education, but you see the numbers for education, that more women are graduating college now than men, and so there are plenty of smart women out there, and they work hard. We are trained to work very hard because we want to, either it's because you want to be perfect, or you don't think you can do it, but we work really hard. Hire women.
So for a company like ours, I think it can be something just as practical as having executive meetings, because myself and another, our CFO basically, are the two executives on the management committee, is having our executive meetings during a time that our kids are actually in school. So it used to be you go to a law, and I worked at a law firm, all the meetings were like at 4, 5, 6. And those are just horrible times when you have children, right? And so I deliberately, when I started at Bias, I actually blocked those times, and they were like my child's sort of like sports hours. But instead of marking them free, I marked them busy, just to force that change such that all those meetings occurred when I was present and not when I was calling in, so that I actually had a voice. And I think that's important. Because I mean, I look at our executive management, it's myself and another female role in the leadership, but the others are basically men, and all of their significant others stay at home and are full-time working parents. And so it just is, it's not that they're anti-women, not to say the least, it's just that they don't think of it. It's not on their radar. And so it doesn't take that much to put it on their radar. They don't really mind having their meetings at 2 or 3. It's just that it's not something that they think about. And so, so it's a small step, but it really makes a huge difference in those of us who have children and who work and who want both.
And I'd like to tell just a short riddle, if I can. So there were a father and son driving in a car, and unfortunately they got into a car accident. And the father passed away, unfortunately, on the scene, and the son was rushed to the emergency room. So they rushed him in, and the surgeon says, wait a second, this is my son. So how can that be? How can it be that the surgeon... So I told this, the reason why I say it's an interesting riddle is I told this to a good friend of mine who's a female surgeon, and she did not get it. And I thought this was so amazing because it's the proof of unconscious bias, right? That we live in a society that maybe dictates that that's the vision of what a surgeon should be, and yet a woman in that role didn't even think of herself in that position that could be me. And so that's something that we're actually doing at J&J. We have a lot of effort to do trainings, and we all had to go through like a 1-hour session on just being aware of our unconscious bias, because sometimes we actually...
J&J training?
We did not. We could do it on our own time. So no, but I think that's an interesting thing. Just be aware of your unconscious bias. And, sometimes it's even just hitting in your face, and it's even the embodiment of you. So that's good.
I think another unconscious bias is if you hire a guy and he's not good, Joe's suck. If you hire Jill and she's not good, women suck. Right? There's a definite, I think it's an unconscious bias, but I hear that all the time. There's something, I guess, scary about women are thinking that no, they're the exact same. Right.
I want to make it one point because I work with entrepreneurs. None of them right now is female, but it's my goal. And I also help out with VCs and do evaluations. And all the evaluations I did in the last few weeks were women entrepreneurs, and they were top presenters and top things. So I would not agree that they should not try to be more perfect before they go out, because that is our maybe differentiator. Because when we present, it is sitting. Or I don't want to make that black and white here. Ma'am is looking at me like I just want to say that there is really already something ongoing in the back. Yeah, we are discussing glass ceiling, but really what I see is very encouraging. And I also agree with the youth and put them in the environment. So I'm with Women in Bio, and we have a program for board-ready women. Yes, the women want to be perfect, so we go to class and do it. We want a certificate. But they also have a youth program for women for science, but they couldn't find anybody to really, we struggle to get women, high schoolers to come to these events, so maybe somebody can advise us a little bit. I'm not with that program. But, and one other thing is risk. So we are a little bit risk averse. I'm an exception, but I worked so long with males, so I adapted. I think I have a very strong masculine side, and but we should maybe have more confidence, more risk, and then it will all, I think, work out.
That's really good to hear about the VC world changing. I think that was one of the topics that we wanted to understand, because I think one of the statistics that, did you read it? It was 2% or?
Yeah, a lot, 2%.
2% of
funding, VC funding go to women founders.
So it's good to hear it's changing. I don't know that it's hit all of our doorsteps, and certainly the statistics aren't showing it. But it sounds like the field, at least in the VC that you work in.
They really would like to see more women entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I want to comment on that too, because I really do think they do want to see that. And I know though, personally, I mean, for Dare, we got traction with the VCs, but I know what we struggled with, and it's part of what makes me wonder too, if this is part of what you see in that statistic, is that I think sometimes women are frankly a little more innovative, and sometimes we're going after things that are not the typical target or typical therapeutic area. And so that statistic may also be a little bit skewed by the fact that we are out there a little bit more. We're not doing the, immuno-oncology or the rare disease or the small molecule, right? So like I was pitching women's reproductive health. And why the VCs struggled with that was not with me, and it was really clear that me and the team resonated, but it was that they had never invested in women's reproductive health, and to suddenly make an investment in a therapeutic area that was so unknown to them, that was their challenge. It wasn't that it was about women, it wasn't that it was a female-led team, it was, wow, how do I even understand that therapeutic area? I don't have comparables to look at. So I also think, because I'm a glass half full kind of person, so I look at that and say, look at us awesome women, because we're going after things that no one else is doing, and eventually it's going to catch up. The statistics are going to catch up because they're going to have to, but I would be so curious to see that analysis done, but looking at what areas these women were pitching. Because I have a hunch from my other female entrepreneurs that I know, most of them are not doing the norm. They're out there doing something innovative, cutting edge, and different, like you, by the way, awesome work you're doing. And I think sometimes that makes it more challenging for good reasons, not the wrong reasons, but because it takes a little more to educate someone about what you're doing.
And there's lots of research profiling women that have these just these psychological profiles where we are risk averse, where we aren't overconfident, where we are seeking perfection, where perfection doesn't exist, and where those hurt them in the pursuit of climbing the career. However, when you're talking about product development, when you're talking about imagining how a technology or a therapy or a product might impact a market or exploit a market, then suddenly those qualities and those characteristics become real game changers. So again, to sort of echo your point about in some instances they're negative, and in another instance they're supremely advantageous. So I respect your observation, and I believe somebody behind you was having your hand up. Yes.
To your point on what can we do, I've got 2 quick points, and I'm interested in the feedback on the, particularly in the second.
And will you please introduce yourself?
Mark Diorio, I ran a company, Magna Sensors, for 20 years. The most valuable thing that I could offer my employees was flexibility in the schedule.
Absolutely.
And that helped women even more. And so everybody here can lobby for that in their company, large and small. That's a huge advantage, and it, I think, brings women up much faster. So I think that's one area. The second thing, and I volunteered a morning a week for 6 years in elementary school. And I saw, particularly in 2nd and 3rd grade, a lot of little girls would say, I'm not good at math. I hate it. And I'd say, well, maybe you're not good yet, but you're going to be good real soon. And I found that was a critical age, and there were a lot of girls that after just a few months of some one-on-one, they were pretty good at it. And I'm kind of curious as to, we talk a lot about what happens at high school, and I totally agree. But I wonder if a lot of this doesn't actually happen earlier, and I'm kind of interested in what the panel has to say on that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, part of it is, we've talked a lot about confidence and risk-taking. I think that's all part of that same spectrum of people just at a young age being told they can do something and they can achieve things. So I definitely think we've got to encourage them at a very young age and give them the confidence that you can be good at it. Because it's innate, like the boys aren't as likely to say they're not good at things because that's just not their kind of innate personalities, and so you just hear it more from the girls, and then it's just reinforced, so I totally agree. Get them early.
I think it's 2 things. I think they hear it, they maybe say it more, but I do really think that a lot of both my daughters, I think they partially learned it from their teachers, because I think there's this idea that a lot of their teachers said, oh, I'm not good at math, so I'm going to be an elementary school teacher because I didn't like science, and that kind of carries across to them, unfortunately. And and this is all, like I said, I'm a scientist, so is my husband, and it was really hard for me and I love math. I think that's like one of my most favorite things is do a math problem. It sounds really awful, but I just think it's really fun. Real nerd. But my daughters don't really get it, but I think they are really starting to appreciate it, and it's because they maybe see what I'm doing and what my, and I think that is breaking the kind of barriers, but they do get it from all sides, and certainly I really commend you for, being there teaching girls, I think, and kids in general, just to learn to love math.
They really get it from their peers. What happens is they look at other kids who are great, and they think, well, they're great, I must be terrible.
Right.
And it's just that you haven't learned it yet. So I think it's actually a more subtle thing than it might appear.
Your comment about really, I would just call it the mentoring, is I think going to be really the big game changer going forward. And the big companies get that concept. I think it's 70% of all Fortune 500 companies now have instituted formal mentoring programs within their companies across the enterprise. Obviously, the competition for talent is ridiculous. And so for those of us, those in the HR, the chief diversity officers that are springing up suddenly in companies all over, recognize that talent acquisition and retention strategy means mentoring has to be central part of their DNA. So the mentoring, whether it's in the grade school or the high school or the college or once you actually get into the companies, is going to be, I think, a real market differentiator. So to the gentleman's question in the back about what can we do as a society, the mentoring, which is one of the key elements of Athena, providing mentoring for women that have already made it to the top, that want to thrive at the top, and those that would like to follow suit. I think that would be a real, probably the most substantive answer that I could give you, in addition to what the panelists shared. We have, I think, 5 minutes left, so let me get this to the lady in the beginning. Oh, no. With the microphone.
Yes.
You got preempted. I won't look at the microphone, that happened.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It was really, really delightful to hear your stories and to see the success you have made. I don't know how to introduce myself. You're asking, I just am an old woman who tried to become an engineer at the age of 16. I fought my battles, and those were very different battles from what you fought in some ways, and in some ways the battles were exactly the same. Now, I've been hearing this underlying thing about girls not feeling adequate about being successful in STEM. I heard it from two gentlemen related to school experiences. In my own personal experience, I wanted to be an engineer for whatever reasons I had at that time. And my mother was concerned a little bit about my going to engineering school, but she thought I was a different kind of person, and so she sort of said, yes, it's good. My father, who's an engineer, he was really scared. So, and it was my mother who sort of persuaded him and said, I think she'll be okay and she can do it fine. So what I'm coming to with this long-winded story, I think the battery's gone. Okay. So what I'm coming with this long-winded story is this. You're talking about society in general, but I think you should address the parents of these young girls. I don't know if schools bring in parents of girls and tell them about what their daughters can do. We all have biases. We all have preconceived notions. Now, I'm not talking about La Jolla Country Day School and all these schools, okay? I'm talking about your average school, low to middle income people. And the parents are so busy trying to make ends meet. They have their own limited life experiences because of where they are from, what they did. They have no idea. And they're looking at their daughters. So a lot of it is coming from the parents. So if you may want to think of ways of having like a special night for parents of girls and say, these are the opportunities. And I would tell the people who are from low and middle income, these careers, they can earn so much. Instead of saying, it's just great to be there, to give them that fiscal incentive so that they recognize, okay, if my daughter does this instead of this, it's good, maybe I can encourage her in math at home.
That's a very good point.
So get to the bottom of the, unit of society, which is the family.
Absolutely.
And reach out to them so that they understand what their daughters can do.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And we have time for one last question. If we can usher the microphone to the front, that'd be great. Can we please introduce yourself?
Sure. Victoria Lakers. Among other things, I started a women's speaker series about 9 months ago because I wasn't seeing enough women that I aspired to be running multi-million-dollar companies. So excited to see this all-women panel. Hope to see more of it. But my question is related a little bit to the family, but how do we balance, flexibility is great in the workplace, but until there's not the assumption that women are going to be the caretakers both for children and family, how does that really play out, and how do you see that dynamic changing?
Very well. Honestly, you have to expect, I think, from your partner an equal. And I'm very fortunate to be married to someone who is just as busy, but is just as willing to take, a part in, child rearing, chores, all that, because it's very hard otherwise. And so I think we expect a lot from the men that we work with, expect the same from the ones we live with.
Yeah, and I would add to that too. It's really what you're looking for in that situation, and what is going to be your personal dynamic that's going to work best for you to find that balance. So in my situation, I did very, very well, and he's a stay-at-home dad. So when we decided we were going to have kids and we looked at my career trajectory and my goals, my personal goals and aspirations versus his, it was very clear. There was no question who should be at home and who should be in the workplace in terms of our own personal fulfillment. But that situation isn't for everybody, but that definitely for me gave me the flexibility to feel like I can do what I need to do, you know, to advance. For some people, it's being in a partnership where you're both having equal roles. With some, it's the woman who wants to take some time to be at home, but then gets that support to go back into the workplace later. For others, it's having flexibility to, you know, they both want to work, but someone wants to pick up the kids and someone wants to drop them off. So I'm a firm believer there's no like right way to do it, but it's really about creating a situation and a dynamic that whatever your right way is, that you can make it happen and move forward with it in a society that accepts it. And I can tell you it was not easy for my husband in the early days of being a stay-at-home dad. People would think he was like snatching the kids at the park or, you know, because there just weren't men, you know, with two adorable little blonde girls, you know, at the park. So, but it takes like figuring out what works for you and then just being strong about it.
A lot of guilt, but live with it. You know, I raised 4 kids and I worked the whole time. I've been lucky to have a partner. It's not 50-50. Sorry. I am still the first phone call from those 4 kids. You know, they have a runny nose, they call. But that, you know, it's also a joy. It's a different world we live in. Embrace it. It's a lot of fun. I've been very fortunate. I've had the best of both worlds. I've had a great career and I have had a large family and all my kids are getting through college. None of them in biology, but so be it. It's been a good ride, but I have had to deal with the guilt, so I probably still do.
But I think for some of us, you don't want us at home. Let's face it. I mean, child services would be at my door.
My husband said every day that I was on maternity leave, he opened the door like, she's still alive there. Because that was not when I was happiest, was at home. So it takes all types.
Wow, what an amazing program. Let's give them a big hand. Ladies, I don't need to tell you, you are an amazing group. Thank you for doing this. As a father of 3 and 2 girls, I wish they were here. You are very motivated. Anil, I know you videotaped this, and for those of you who would like a copy of this video, let us know because I intend to play this for my kids. So thank you.
It'll be on YouTube.
Okay. Kara, I have a daughter who would love to go in a partnership with your daughter on the robotic nail. I think it's, there was a lot of talk about educating girls at the high school level. A lot of you may not know, you're here today because of TiE, and TiE is for entrepreneurs, but there's also a second part of TiE called TiE, which stands for the Young Entrepreneur. And we just literally last week finished up our season, so we work with high school students and we basically mentor them on how to become an entrepreneur. We actually have a global competition and we're sending 3 teams from San Diego to Washington at the national level. It's very exciting. We sponsor them to go for that. I couldn't help to hear over and over again how people said, I wish they would have gotten started earlier, and we agree with you as well. Many of you are here for the very first time, and I hope you will come back. But one of the things that TiE does a great job of is mentoring young businesses, young entrepreneurs. And look at the caliber of people on this panel. We have a lot to offer. I want to share with you a couple of things that has happened this year, just to get an idea of the caliber of the program that we put on. You know what's coming up in May for cannabis. But last month we had a huge review, a bunch of comments that I had received. We had it on the new tax reform and the economy. We had an economist speak on what's taking place. The previous month was on cloud computing and data storage. And prior to that one was scaling up your startup. So we've had some really strong program. I would like you all have a comment card in front of you. Will you please take a moment to complete this for us? We're going to be collecting it. We're going to be doing a couple of raffles as well. But your input is really valuable. Just out of show of hand, how many of you are planning on attending next month's event? Just a quick show of hands.
Will there be samples?
There. I will tell you, there's one thing I really liked a lot, Liz, that you had to say. It's the side hustle. I just think that's for me, especially with each of your background and what you have been through. I mean, it's amazing. As you're coming, if you'll finish your comment card, Jessica, Mindy, you're collecting them. We're going to do a quick raffle. I would like to take a moment to thank Devon for putting this whole thing together. Let's give him a big hand, please.
Thank you, Sandeep. So I'm really amazed. When I set up this panel, I did not know what I was getting into, and I was a little bit worried. But you guys just blew the rooftop, I would say. So please give them a round of applause. And a small token of our appreciation. We have a small gift for each of you. And actually, if you would open that gift, you can show the audience what it is. It's a very appropriate gift that Preeti, where's Preeti? Is Preeti here?
Preeti, where are you?
So this was her brainchild to get you this gift, How Women Rise. This is Marshall.
Yeah. This is the say who the author is.
Marshall Goldsmith's new book with his co-author Sally.
Marshall Goldsmith is a charter member of TiE right here.
So hopefully we'll get Marshall to come and talk in the next few months to one of these events. So make sure you all come back for that event. Thank you, Sandeep. I'm turning it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.